Hi, welcome to After the Well, a conversational podcast where my guest and I explore life-transforming encounters with faith, inspired by the woman at the well. Join me, Melissa Lapin, as we discover the power of belief, redemption, and spiritual refreshment. Subscribe now and embark on a journey of inspiration and transformation. See you at the well. Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of After the Well. And today I have my new friend, Kim Cannon, on here. And I'm excited about this conversation because I only know very little about Kim, but I think she's spunky and sassy, and I love her personality and her attitude. And I got to spend a little time with her a couple weeks ago at a leadership summit that I went to, and she told some stories and shared some of her heart. And then I got really excited about having this podcast interview. So, Kim, hi.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad you said yes, and we got to work this out, that you could come on. Tell us a little bit about yourself, because I really don't know a lot about you other than just what you shared and little tidbits that I've heard here and there. I know you've got 2 girls and 2 boys, and you're an engineer. Yes. That's about all I know.
Yes. So growing up, I was pretty much a leader, but didn't realize I was a leader because I was silent so often. So walking through my journey, I realized somewhere along the way, I said, hey, I want to be a teacher when I grow up. And I was discouraged from that. And my mom encouraged me to become an engineer. So that was the path that I was on. I really didn't know what it meant. I'm going to be an engineer. As I continued on that journey, and I realized, the expectations, women don't do engineering. So here I am. I want to fit. Everything in me wants to fit, but I don't fit. I don't fit anywhere, right? All men. All of my classes, I'm one of very few women in the classes. Work through that, realized that through schooling, I had my children. So I got married at age 20. I had my son when I went back to school. He was 9 months old. So I did not have the traditional college days. A little bit about my history as well. So I grew up Catholic. And in 8th grade, I walked away. I walked away from the faith. I was like, nope, this isn't for me. Never thought I'd step foot in church again. And I was just focused on becoming that career woman. And I am going to do what I want to do.
So what was it about, not throwing any shade on any denomination or whatever, but what was it about Catholicism that you walked away from? What was it? What was missing for you?
Yeah. So for me, the experience that I had, my dad grew up in a Catholic school. My mom did not have that same background. So she didn't have that same, faith belief. So for her, there was some tension in some of the things that they had encountered. One example, birth control. They had a family, 4 kids, couldn't really afford to feed the family that they had. They received some negative experiences because they were wanting to use birth control, and that is a belief that the Catholic didn't believe. So for her, it was kind of, we would go on Sundays every now and again, Christmas, Easter, we weren't living it. So for me, recognizing that, like, my mom doesn't even like it. Why would I go? Like, why should I like it?
Why am I going to bother, right? Yeah.
Right. So for me, she always said, once you're confirmed, it's your choice on, it's your faith walk. It's your choice. And so I saw it as graduation from the church, which is really crazy because I always pictured myself as being a nun. Like when I was super little, I had the heart, I had Jesus, but I didn't have the terminology. I remember in kindergarten being in one of the Sunday schools, and I felt Jesus hug me. Like I physically felt a hug, and I was like,
oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And so then afterward, I told my mom, hey, Jesus hugged me today. And she just looked at me like, that doesn't happen.
Bless your heart.
And so I was like, oh, okay, well, then I didn't have a hug. But, I physically felt. And so walking away, I think a huge encounter that I had was my 8th grade year where I lost my virginity at age 13, and I saw myself as unworthy. And I don't belong. Like, there's no way I could ever be a nun now because I'm damaged goods, right? So that took on a whole different trajectory in my life where promiscuity entered in. And I felt very judged because even though people weren't judging me, people didn't know this about me. Like, there was just something that I was carrying. There was so much guilt and shame and at such a young age, right? So that happened probably right before I was confirmed. And there was just this trajectory of I was very lost. And I was looking for my identity everywhere else of like, who am I supposed to be? You know, and everybody put that identity of, you're a slut now. So that's like, oh, that's who I am, right? So living that out in my day-to-day, and just in the party scene.
Wow, at 13, 14, 15, man, like the woman at the well, there's literally zero history on this woman, like none. She existed nowhere until her conversation with Jesus. And yet, all the messages, when we think about the messages that we've heard that, you know, she was a prostitute, which is why she was at the well at noon, because she didn't want to put up with the slander of other people. I'm like, that is not even biblical. It's nowhere in scripture. And it's sad that how a lot of our lives are ruled by what other people say about us.
It's so
the
true.
Lies that we believe that other people say. And that's hard as a 13-year-old. So be as vulnerable as you want to. Was losing your virginity, was that a choice for you? Were you...
Not really. So it was a boyfriend that I had, and I used to go to his house after school. And I remember, like, his parents weren't home yet. I was so trusting, but it happened. And I remember laying there wanting to, like, say no. Like, I was so frozen. You learn about in trauma, there's different reactions. You could fight, flight, freeze, right? I was in the freeze, and I was like wanting to say no. But then there was even a part of me that was like, if I say no, he's going to break up with me.
Yeah.
Like, that, so wanting to belong to somebody was so deep within me. That even, and the crazy thing is, so after this happens, he goes to school, tells everybody about what happened. I get this label, and then he breaks up with me because I'm a slut.
Let's go find this guy right now and kick his ass. Let's do it. Let's create a girl gang. We can forgive and see. No.
But yeah, so just like, and it's hard enough to be in middle school, right? So all of this happens. I'm dealing with all of this. And I was like, oh, so confused. Didn't really have anybody to talk to. I knew that, like, my parents wouldn't understand. I had one good girlfriend that we talked about stuff, but she's of no help. She's the same age, right? So I think that was probably a huge turning point in why I had walked away from God. And it's because of the shame that I was feeling from all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, that was my next question. Where was God in all of this for you? But I mean, and not necessarily throwing shade on denominations or whatever, but the church doesn't make it a safe place to talk about your feelings. You know, they're like, you need more faith, or, all the things. And you're just like, that's why I'm here. You're not helping.
Yeah.
So, so then where did you go? Excuse me. Like you said, you were married and didn't have the typical, college experience, because you were obviously a young mom in college and all the things. So was there just, I guess at that point, just not time for God? When was your well moment with God? When did Jesus knock on your door and say, hey, I'm still here, I miss you?
Yeah. So it was a very subtle, like, he would bring different people into my life. So when I got pregnant before I got married. So I was pregnant at 20. I was engaged to be married, but got pregnant. And when I was pregnant with my son, my sister, who was going to church with her husband, said, you should go to church to give your kids morals. And I was like, yeah, maybe. I don't think so. So then I kind of like poo-pooed the idea. And then there were multiple times like Jehovah's Witnesses would come to my door and speak different things that would just like bring a little light of like, okay, I know that everything they believe is not correct, but God just used this person to touch something within me. And I remember there was also there was a Latter-day Saint. So we had a college nearby that was a Latter-day Saint college, and part of their homework or assignments was that they would have to go evangelize the neighborhoods. And there were these couple of kids that would show up at my doorstep, and I was just like, I was too nice, right? Like, I'll be nice, I'll talk to you. And I remember him, like my son came up to the door with me and he pointed at my son and he said, God loves you more than you love your son. And I was like, what? Like, he doesn't love me. Like, if you knew anything about what I've been through, there's no way he could love me the way that I love my son. And so then when I was pregnant with my second son, my little boy, so like these little instances that kept happening was just getting my attention of like, God's still there and like giving me a new perspective. And then when I was pregnant with my second son, my marriage was so dysfunctional, I guess. I was like grasping at straws of like, well, maybe if we go to church together, maybe there's something good that could come out of that. And maybe, so I started looking for a church again when I was pregnant with my second one. And I had my 2-year-old by my side. I was 22 and I probably look like I'm 16 because I've always looked younger than I am. And I got so many judgmental glares. And I was like, because my husband wasn't with me and they just looked at me like, single mom, way too young to be having babies. And I was like, I do not want to be any part of this. No way, no how. Like, I am not about to be judged. And so then completely gave up on the idea. Well, then college comes around. So I had been co-oping where I would go to school a semester, work a semester, and I was working at the steel mill and I wanted to get different experience. So I had put my resume in. The career center had not heard anything from anybody else. Finally, I'm supposed to go back to the mill. I hear from the utility company. I start working for the utility company and they have the assignment that they gave me, I had it done in like 2 weeks because it was something like identical to what I had already done at the mill. And so then I'm like, well, what am I going to do now? So they partnered me up with one of their engineers that would drive around in the truck from substation to substation. And just so happens that his wife was a preschool teacher and I was looking for preschool and it was at the church. And so I was just thinking, hey, maybe I can check out the preschool for my son. Had no intention of going to church, and just the love and welcoming. And it was such a different experience. They were amazing, absolutely amazing. And so then I started through the preschool, and then they would have like different things at church on Sunday where the kids would be singing or whatever. And so I would start attending there. And then from that, they had a Bible study after church for the adults while they had the kids go to their Sunday school. And I was like, well, I guess I go to the Bible study. And I remember sitting there thinking, this is in the Bible? Growing up Catholic, I don't know if I never opened the Bible. Like, we would hear stories, we would learn different things, but it was never like really get into the word and hear about the dysfunction that's in the Bible.
Well, you're not encouraged to. I've had conversations years ago with people, and I said something to somebody, I don't need to read my Bible. Anything I need to know, my priest will tell me. And I'm like, oh, I'm pretty sure that's not what Jesus had in mind,
Yeah.
But circling back a little bit, because I had the thought, I think it's beautiful that God used the different, quote, denominations and faiths and cults, occults, or not occult, be cults, just the different obscure believing people, because because they do, their beliefs are different. And, the Jehovah Witnesses and the Mormon, they rewrite their Bible every 8 years or whatever it is to make it more accurate. And they add books and all the things. And yet you heard Father's heart for you in that, because ultimately we're all doing the best we can to hear the Father heart of God. The Baptists, the Methodists, the Catholics, the Jehovah's Witness, the Mormon, everybody, we're all doing it. And I don't think, there are some that are more kingdom than others, but I don't think anyone has, the monopoly on what the Father heart of God looks like. And I think it's really cool that even though you decided, that XYZ of the Catholic Church wasn't good enough, wasn't good enough, just wasn't getting it done, wasn't feeding your spirit, that you weren't hardened toward God. You just didn't want to do the other things, jump through loops. Because I had the same thing. It's like my dad died when I was 15, and these people, I don't even remember who they were, I just know they showed up in a Corvette one night and was going to take me and my sister to Awana's with their 2 kids. I didn't know these people. I'm assuming they were my mother's friends. I don't know. Never saw them before. And I went, and it was like a Methodist church or something. We had no grid. I grew up with God. My parents were atheists, but God just wasn't a thing. And so we did that. And I'm like, no, whatever. And then later on, I went to I think the same church, I don't know, when I was in high school. And I'm like, I'm selling weed to these high schoolers on Friday night. Why am I going to go play these games on Sunday and Wednesday, having to be whatever? I wasn't opposed to God. I was opposed to the games and the hypocrisy and the, why am I going to jump through these hoops to be all perfect and whatever, when you just swapped me some beer for some weed, I mean, I don't know. That's just me.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, we have that image of what the church people are, and we don't understand that. We are all human. We all have that stuff and when you truly meet Jesus and that change happens. And for me, I started going to church, but I was still in the party scene. My husband had nothing to do with it. And it was I was in this torn, okay, Sunday mornings we're going to do this, but we're going to get really drunk the night before, And
hopefully you don't go to church hungover on Sunday. Because that's the worst, when you're sitting in the pew wishing that you could just close your eyes or go vomit or something. And you have to sit there because it's the good thing to do. Been there.
Yep. So I remember it was New Year's Eve. So from 2000 to 2001. And we went and partied with my husband's coworkers, and it was at his brother's house. So we worked with his brother, and it was at his brother's house. We stayed the night there because we got stupid drunk. The kids were with grandma. And that night did a lot of really stupid stuff that I would not normally do if I was not drunk. And the next day we're driving back to pick up the kids, and he's teasing me about stuff that I had done. And I just bust into tears, and I was like, I'm going to hell. And he's like, what are you talking about? And I said, this isn't the life God has for me. And instantly, I just felt something come upon me. I didn't have words for it. I know now that it was Holy Spirit, right? That was my conversion point of
come on.
No, this isn't the life that I have for you. I have so much more, so much better. And I am going to help you navigate that. And it was so instantly I started seeing everything completely different. I remember prior to that, I was so stressed out with school, getting good grades. And it was after that, I was like, God, you got me. I'm prepared. I'm ready. And it was just such a different, I saw things completely different. And the really odd thing is I stopped swearing. Not that it bothered me. It wasn't intentional. I'm going to stop swearing, but it's it just went away. And I remember my husband asking me about that.
I haven't had that encounter yet.
And I remember my husband asking me why don't you swear anymore? And I was like, I don't know. Like it wasn't intentional. I mean,
That's
I still
funny.
like today I would probably swear here and there, but like it used to be like every other word was an F-bomb or, it's
Yeah.
just so different. And just the transformation. And I no longer had any desire to drink alcohol. It was just gone. And I was like, this is really weird. I don't understand any of it. And today I'll drink a glass of wine, but like there was just a season where I was like, no, I don't need that. Like I'm figuring out what life God has for me, because what I've been doing is not what he has intended for me. So that was
Interesting. So that was like your well moment. So in that, let's dive a little bit. Were there particular things that he told you? Were there prophetic words that you might have gotten? That kind of thing? Because at the well, he had conversation with her. And she's like, okay, it's obvious you know who I am, and all about me. Was there any of that kind of processing that has stayed with you, that has helped you through?
Yeah, what's really interesting is that I heard him, but I didn't recognize that I was hearing him. Like things would come to mind, and it was like like different things I would know. There would be times where I'd wake up in the middle of the night and just open up the Bible randomly, and here's the scripture exactly what I needed for whatever the situation was. But not having that prophetic background. So the church that I was at, it was non-denominational, but there was never any talk about prophetic or like hearing God. And I remember, so that would have been January 2001, we moved to Wisconsin. So I lived in Indiana. We moved to Wisconsin in June of 2001, January of 2001. I don't know if I said 2021. I might have got the date. So
you did. You said 21. Yeah.
Okay. January of 01 is when that happened. So 1101 is my spiritual birthday. And then in June, we moved to Wisconsin, and I remember thinking, like, I'm never going to find a church that's going to be the same, welcoming, all of that. Plugged into a church, and through that, I started taking a bunch of different classes that they offered, and I found the more academic I got, the less I heard from him. And if I heard from him, I dismissed it. Like, oh, the experts are saying this. I must be wrong because I'm so new in my faith. But I can look back now and I can see how he guided me 100%. And as long as I would stay out of that academic, like I would hear him so much better. But if I would get too academic, too logical, like this is what this is and this is what you're supposed to do, and more of that religion, this is what we do, versus the experience of he knows me better than I know myself.
Yeah.
Allow him to speak to me in the ways that he speaks to me. And it's going to be unique for every person. It's going to be unique in every situation. And so when I realized that I was losing that, so, I journeyed with him about a year before I really started second guessing, like what I was hearing. And then I remember hearing, I took a how to study the Bible class, and they basically said, you are never to just randomly open the Bible and take what you read. And I was like, what? Oh no, I've been doing this wrong for so long. Because so many times God talked to me that way.
Yeah.
And I was like,
I absolutely hate when teachers or leaders, they make an absolute like that. You should never do this and you should never do that. And there's no grace for anybody. They obviously do not understand the character and nature of God and Holy Spirit and how they talk and how they communicate. And as you're talking, I'm sitting here thinking, because you talked about the more academic you got, the less you gave credit to this as being God's voice. And that's probably because you're like academic in your head anyway. Being an engineer, you're formulaic in everything. And so as soon as you have a formula for God, you don't need God, and so he hindered you from having a formula.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then there are those leaders that were around you that said you couldn't do it without a formula, and that's a hard place to be. I mean, that's the frustrating thing for me about just religion and people in an office of teacher, apostle, prophet, whatever, is that most people in those positions have their dogma, and it's like you can't deviate from that, and that's their message and that's their thing. And you're just like, yeah, but you're not leaving room for Holy Spirit or personalities of people. You know, you're not meeting, your formula is not allowing people to be people.
Absolutely. So. And the recognition that I've had over this time is that if I put a formula to it, then I no longer need God. And he is all about the relationship. You know, he's going to confuse my formula on purpose to bring me back to him. 100%. And there's been so many times, like, if I do A plus B, I should get C. And it's like, okay, I did A and B and I'm not getting C. What the heck?
Yeah, he does that. I'm that way. Just because I like checklist, and okay, if I do A, then B, that, you know, there is a progression that this has happened. There is a rhythm to things. There, you know, there's a way things need to be done. And so that's the fight I have, because the more I try, you know, it's like I strive to be at rest. You know, well, that's a vicious cycle right there. It's like, okay, I just got to be calm. Let me make everything perfect so I can be calm. And then you get caught up in all of that. And it's like, the more I try and the harder I try, the less I hear, the less peace I have. And so it's been a hard road, but I've just my everyday with God looks different every day. Because I cannot set my alarm, get up, go sit with my Bible and coffee I don't drink coffee, but my Bible and whatever at 7:45 to 8:15, and, you know, and check it off my list because it becomes a checklist.
Right. And the thing that I've recognized too is, like in my seasons, right, when I was going through a bunch of marriage stuff, I would journal a ton. I had my prayer journal. I would spend time with God. It was all about, like, that was my survival mode. I could not have made it without that without that in my life in that season, because I had nothing else. I was grasping at straws. I was like, okay, God, you can change him anytime. And God's like, no, we're going to change you first.
I hear you.
And so then sitting down and having that, but then the recognition of every season in life is going to be different. Like, I had carved out time to make that happen. But then as the kids got older, life got busier, I had to learn how to connect with him in different ways. Like, I cannot have that time every single day, but I still need that connection. So what does that look like, Lord? Show me how I can connect with you in the midst of my day to day. When I'm running errands, when I'm working, when I'm like, some of the best times is when I'm doing like mindless activities at work. That's just very, you know, you don't really have to have much brain power. I'll put worship music in and like, okay, this is feeding me. This is connecting me. And there's other times where I'll find myself just walking the hallways and I'm like praying under my breath. And I'm like, oh, interesting. Probably people are thinking I'm super crazy, but it's like catching those like moments with him, because we don't always have the time to sit down with him and be so devoted. But it's important, right? We can't neglect it completely, but we can't put a formula, a rigid, like, oh, you're not as holy as I am because you don't spend every morning with God.
Right. Could you not tarry 1 hour? Not today, you know, but, that's the beauty of having the revelation. When we truly understand Trinity and Christology, of Trinity is in us. And we do not have to look outside of ourselves for anything, including quiet time or connection time, whatever you want to call it. We don't have to sit and meditate for 2 hours a day. I mean, yay, if you can. When I had my art studio before I just closed it, there were days where I went in and I had 3 and 4 hours where I would just sit with my eyes closed with soaking music on. And I would just contemplate and be in the presence, or I would sit and I would journal for 2 hours, 3 hours. Mm-hmm. And that's great. And I still love that. There are those times when we need to become separate from the everyday. But being able to walk around your hallway, do laundry. The woman at the well, she was getting water. Mm-hmm. Just everyday tasks. We don't know why she was there at noon. And I dare anybody and I challenge anybody to tell me why she was there at noon, because we don't know, right? Mm-hmm. And there he was. And conversation, and to understand that it's just about positioning our heart. Mm-hmm. And go, where are you today? Where are you right now, Jesus? Mm-hmm. I've got a friend who talks about how he'll get up and go for a walk or something, and he'll stick out his hand and he'll ask Jesus to hold his hand while he's walking from one office to the other. Jesus, will you walk with me? And he said more often than not, he will feel Jesus put his hand in his hand. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. It's not a big thing. We're not at seminary. We're not at, synagogue. We're not in church on a Sunday. Mm-hmm. And yet it's about turning our heart and going, there you are. Mm-hmm. Because they're not the ones that went away anywhere. We're the ones that get busy in our schedule. We get lost in our mind. We get separated in our thoughts. Mm-hmm. So, girl, sorry, I started preaching on your podcast.
Absolutely. No, and I think about what happens when you're so intertwined with him throughout your day. You can bring him to that meeting where there's hard things you need to talk about. Mm-hmm. And you can tap into that. Okay, Holy Spirit, what's your perspective on the situation? Mm-hmm. You can be a light in a dark world mm-hmm. because you have that connection, and you don't have to be weird about it. You can speak life without quoting scripture.
Sounding like the Pope.
Right. And just the recognition of when our relationship with him is solid, it's just going to come out. It's going to be part of who we are.
And that's the key right there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's going to look different for everybody, right? So what you do mm-hmm. versus what I do versus whatever, we can never compare ourselves to somebody else and, oh my gosh, they have it all put together. Because it's funny, you realize there's people in my world, in my journey as I've walked, I'm like, oh my gosh, they have it all together. They're so perfect. And the more you know about them, the more you get to them, no, they're just as messed up as I am.
Mm-hmm. I'm like, damn, I didn't know that. Okay. All right. I just moved you to a different circle of life here.
Yeah. And it's so much is oh my gosh, they're so perfect. I want to be them. And then you're like, mm-hmm. no, I really don't want that life, because they're going through it too. Right. So mm-hmm. I think for so many women though, it comes down to, I am not good enough.
Yeah.
I can't do that. They've been silenced their whole life. They are put in a box of, you're not worthy. You can't do this. You can't handle this. It's interesting. One of my spiritual mentors, my spiritual mother, I would meet with her every Saturday morning, and she was in her 70s, I think. Eventually her husband passes away, and she's talking about I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills. I don't know how to take care of my car. I don't all of these things. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh my gosh, in my world, I'm the one paying the bills. I'm the one it's just my husband and I share duties very equally. Mm-hmm. And for her to be in that mindset of the culture, the generation she was from, women didn't do any of that stuff. So then when mm-hmm. husband passes away, she's like, I don't even know what to do. And mm-hmm. it really caught my attention of what are the things in our world where we have to depend on Holy Spirit more, that we're learning something mm-hmm. new, because that's when she really started walking in a very different way. Her spiritual walk took on a whole different, she always used to say, Jesus is my husband now. and I'm going to go to Jesus and ask Jesus how to do this. And so mm-hmm. it was just, the mindset of, we have that, we can tap into that, anything new.
Yeah. Yeah. There was this awesome lady, and I was watching her video yesterday, and she was talking about the Cinderella syndrome. It was you. And I was watching the KLM video. Yeah, talk about that for a second, because you alluded to that, and it's how like we as women are, I guess, preconditioned
Yes.
to rely on men.
Yes. And there was a book out there. It's called The Cinderella Complex, I believe is what it's called. And it was like written in the early 80s. And in my research, I was looking at basically, in the 70s, the women's liberation, like all of these women they have all of this freedom, but they would still be holding themselves back. And the more research they did, they discovered that young boys are encouraged to be independent from their parents. Young girls are encouraged to be dependent on others. And so even though they now have all of this independence, they don't have the skills and ability, like they've never practiced it. So it's so important to be able to allow our children to find what they're good at and not fit them into a box of, no, you have to be this, no, you have to be that, no, you can't do this, no, like, okay, Lord, who did you just create and how do I parent that? And I realized, realizing parenting boys, parenting girls looked very different. They were very different. And I remember being so strict. I was like, my boys can't play with guns. And, I had that whole Christian mindset of like, we don't want them to be violent. And I'm like, they would just make believe like they would find a gun in anything.
Their fingers. I mean, come on.
Like that's their nature. They're protectors.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we are created differently, but it doesn't mean that one cannot do something versus another. It's what is the gifting? What are their interests? And when I realized that research and, just thinking about, well, that was how many years ago, do we still have that today? And the recognition, I have held myself back in meetings, in conversations, in the man's world of engineering. I have held myself back of like, no, I'll just wait until they give me permission to talk. When they ask me my opinion, I'll give it to them. That's not what we should be doing. So
in that, because, I mean, for all intents and purposes, you're in a man's world, sadly, because women don't get recognized and they're not taken seriously, and never have been for their brains. How does God encourage you in that? What are some of the things? I mean, it's good. I get you're strong and you can say, I know who I am in God. But we can all say that. But how do you walk that out? How do you walk out your personal vision statement, your power identity statement in the guys club?
Yeah, it has definitely been a work in progress. So probably about 5 to 7 years ago, he had me at a women's conference. The speaker asks us to write the word, the first word that comes to mind, and fearless came to mind. And then she goes on to speak and she's like, okay, that word that you wrote down, that's what God's going to be working on in you. And I was like, fearless? I thought that I already was fearless. It was just, he kept pointing out every situation where I was operating out of fear. Like, if I choose to do this with my kids, am I going to mess them up? What are people going to think? Like, in my parenting, there was fear. In my day-to-day, there was fear. So it was just that it was really a gradual, like, no, I have something to offer. I can bring this. And I absolutely am in a great place of employment. So I don't see it as much as like some of my other places I've worked, but it's still, here and there. But to live out, the other thing that I've recognized too is that as a woman, I have had to put in like 110% where a guy could put in like 90% and get the same recognition as my 110%.
Or more. Yeah.
Yes. And so for me, it's like to be like, okay, Lord, like, give me the power and strength and courage to speak up what I need to speak up, to say when I feel that there has been an injustice in this situation. And he is so with me in all of that. And I see how I have ruffled feathers. And I remember one time there was, so I was the functional manager of a team. And there was a promotion that was going to happen at one of our other design centers. And so there's an interview process, or like they have to present a certain portion. And then there's like a Q&A portion, and for them to get to this principal level of engineering. And it was a woman. And so this was a rare thing for a woman to be in that principal role. And she gives her presentation, talks about all the great things that she's done and she's accomplished. And then after she leaves the room, so it was a virtual setting, after she leaves the room, the functional managers at the different design centers are talking about, what do we think? Is she ready to move up to that next level as principal engineer? Like talking through, is it, is she truly ready? And I remember one of the guys spoke up and said, she has done so many great things. I just wish that she would speak up about it. And everything in me was like, you guys have no idea the pressure that's put on a young girl to stay quiet. And they carry that into their adulthood. They carry that into their career. So you cannot falter because society has conditioned her to not speak up, not take credit, not to stand out. That is not encouraged for young women. It's not encouraged for little girls. Like, I think back to one of my aha moments that I had with God was, I was like, God, why do I have such a hard time using my voice? And he brought me to this memory where I was riding around on my tricycle. I was probably like 4 or 5. And I'm barking orders, being the leader that I am. Telling people how to play, how to not play, which isn't necessarily a good leadership. You're young, you don't know the difference. But I remember as I'm like saying things, one of the adults that were nearby spoke up and said, "Oh, the squeaky wheel gets the oil." And it was very derogatory towards me of like, I'm just, and I didn't understand it, but I knew that whatever I had been doing wasn't okay. Like I picked up on those vibes. And in that moment, I silenced myself, and I'm 4 or 5 years old, didn't even realize I did it. And it was like years later, so 40 years later probably, when I'm having this prayer time with God, I'm like, God, why do I have such a hard time speaking up in meetings? Why do I have such a hard time using my voice? And he brought that back to me, and he was like, you were never meant to be silenced. And there are so many women that have been silenced, and they don't even realize that they have. And they defer to others, and I could never do that. And we are so powerful. We have so much that people don't even realize we carry. And we need, and doing it in an honoring way. Like, we don't have to bash the men for us to shine.
Come on. Yes, that's so good.
Yeah. And I so many, like, I think about, it's cute because my daughters who are like 21 and 19, right? So the whole feminist movement that's in existence today.
Is it like, really? They're bullies. I don't know that they actually are operating in the true definition of feminism. They are just being bullies.
Yes.
With no identity.
Yes. And so we'll have those conversations and they're like, well, Mom, you're a feminist, aren't you? And I'm like, no, I don't think I am.
Not by your definition, anyway.
Yeah. And they're like, well, what's the difference? And just explaining that, like, we can have value, men can have value. And when we come together in our strengths, we can be an unstoppable team. And that's what I've seen with more and more women in engineering now at our company, and the project teams that work so well together, and the strengths of the women, the strengths of the men, like, they come together. They are unstoppable in problem solving and creating all of the things that are research and development, creating a product, getting a product out in market. They are an amazing team. So, yes. But it's recognizing that I carry that. It's recognizing it's okay for me to speak. It's okay for me to not go along with what they're saying. I just have so many stories of like.
Okay, tell them. Go ahead.
I remember when I first became a manager of the engineering team, one of my peers, one of the managers that were leading a different team, fundamentally, we had such different leadership styles. And everything in me was like, I am cringing at the way that you're treating or talking about your team. And it was just this back and forth of like, they're all about control and I'm all about empower. And,
big difference.
Huge difference. And I'm just like, it's so old school. It's so unhealthy. And the more research you see, the more of our natural tendencies of how we lead as women is what businesses need. We need the connection. So I recently came across, so being in the learning and development department now, so I've kind of journeyed in my career following my passions. And I came across some research, and they were talking about what they're calling human leadership. And it's all about influencing, and it's about empathy, and it's about connecting human to human. And I'm like, that's what we do as women, right? Like,
we nurture. You nurture other people.
You see them as a person, not just I am your boss and you are my subordinate and you're going to do as I say. Like, and that's what the people need, that especially coming out of COVID. There's just such a different dynamic in the business world, and more studies are showing that they don't have enough people to step up and lead in the way that they need to be led. And I know that we carry it as women naturally, but we need to let go of everything that has been put on us that doesn't belong there. So I'm convinced that when we're born, we have the DNA we need. We have everything within us to fulfill that calling. As we continue to grow, people start putting stuff on us that doesn't really belong, or they start taking stuff away from us that should be there. And so for us, as we mature, it's to find those things that are missing that used to be there. Like, I need that back. And then getting rid of the things that they don't belong there. They never should have been put on you. And that is when we realize that we have what we need and we're able to walk in it as leaders, we're unstoppable.
Well, that's true. And I think we'll kind of land that here, because that's a good place. Because the woman at the well, her empowerment came, I think she knew everything, like, already. Samaritans and Jews were different in their education, and like women could be, she was really educated. Like, she challenged Jesus from the get-go. Who are you to be? I'm like, she didn't run and hide. She didn't be like, oh, I'm sorry, sir, I'll go away. He didn't have to ask her to stay or anything. She was a very confident, powerful woman, because just in the conversations and the things that she had with him, and going, okay, it's obvious you know about me. And then she says later on, when she went to go away, she's like, hey, come listen to this man. He told me everything. So she already was self-aware. I mean, she had to be of some age, because to have 5 husbands, there had to be some history there. Yeah. Even if you did get married when you're 12 and 13 years old back then. Right. 5 husbands, unless they all died within weeks of each other, that's a significant lifetime. So she wasn't 15.
Yes. And something just totally clicked as you were talking about that. So I remember hearing a sermon about the woman on the well, and how in that time the women had no choice. They could not get a divorce. For her to have 5 husbands, if they divorced her, they were rejecting her, right? And so it's not that, we have a very different image today of somebody who's been divorced 5 times. But if you think about the rejection she encountered over and over and over again, and as you're saying that, she was an educated woman, she was a confident woman, and was it that she was not fitting into that mold of what a wife should be, that they're like, you're no good. I can't do anything with you.
I think she was a rebel. I really do, because you can't stand as a woman in front of a Samaritan woman too, Samaritan strike 2 right there, in front of Jesus, and go, she's like, how are you going to drink? You don't even have a bucket. I mean, she challenged him right out of the gate. Okay, dude, you're at my well, and you got, and so just realizing, like you said, the things that people say and the things that we believe in ourselves, and all of the men or women, I mean, all of the labels that were put on her, even now, to some thousand years later, she was a prostitute. No, she was not a prostitute.
Yep.
Who knows why she was at the well at noon? Maybe she washed clothes and this was her third trip to the well that day. We don't know, and which is why I'm so against judging. Just don't judge people because you just don't know. You really don't know.
Right. And you talk about that you don't know her life. We talk about, you see somebody, you're like, oh, they have the perfect life, when you realize, no, they don't. Like, we don't know anything about that person's life, so we can't judge at all.
Exactly. And especially with like social media and stuff, we know what people want us to know. Good or bad. Some people put all their trash on I'm like, bro, you did not need to post that. We did not need to know all of that, but the whole point in it is that our identities have to come from Jesus. Our giftings, our purposes, our passions have to come through the revelation of Jesus Christ. We have to see ourselves through the lens of how the Trinity sees us, how Jesus sees us, how we were made in the beginning of time, knit together in our womb, apple in his eye, all the things. And we spend so much of our time, way back like you were in the beginning at 13. Oh, well, you're broken. You're damaged goods. You can't do X, Y, Z. And it took you, 30 some odd years later to go, oh, I'm not trash. Oh, I'm not broken. I got a little bit of smudge, but all I need is the water of Jesus to wash over me, and I'm good to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
and
good.
There's so much freedom that comes with that when you realize I'm good. Like, regardless of good, bad, indifferent, everything that's happened in my life, I'm still good. 100%.
Yeah, because Jesus ain't going nowhere, and he's not going to stop loving me, and I'm doing the best I can. And I think that's the key, too. You got to be doing the best you can. You can't just be living a jacked up shit life and blaming God for woe is me. God, I'm sitting in a trailer, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I didn't put you there.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a whole other crazy rant I could go off on, that we blame God for the things when we make no effort on our own. So we have to be doing the best we can.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier, with our hearts positioned toward God, like, God, I don't know what this looks like, but I need you to show up in my life. Not that he went anywhere, but it's our perspective on him. And I know it's become a cliche word, but okay, Jesus, I need you to manifest in my life. I need to see your goodness in my life. I need to hear your words of love and affirmation in my heart right now. And that's all he's asking. We don't have to dress ourselves up and we can't save ourselves. He already did that, and we have to acknowledge that.
Yes.
So with that said, landing number 2, what would be some encouragement, one thing of encouragement that you'd like to leave with the listeners, men and women, whatever, what would be some good something?
Yeah. So a motto that I've come to live is, once you become fearless, life becomes limitless. We hold it back so many times out of fear. So remove those shackles, and recognize that the perfect love casts out fear, and perfect love is Jesus. So that is probably nugget number 1. And the second one is really identifying who you are meant to be and being okay with exploring, and that self-reflection time of, if you're in a conversation with somebody and like, oh, that just triggered me, like there was some kind of weird emotional thing that just happened there, spending that time to think about it and like, where did this even come from? Why am I reacting the way that I'm reacting? Because we learn so much about ourselves, and for us to be able to fit where we're supposed to fit in the world and do what we're meant to do, we have to be able to shed the things that don't belong and find the things that are missing and bring that back and ask Holy Spirit, I need that. I need it back. I know that I had it at one time. I need it again. I know that that's supposed to be there, but for some reason it was stolen from me, right? So I think that's like the two key things is fearlessness and self-reflection, not being afraid to look at our lives and what has affected us.
Which is also being fearless. Being fearless of self-discovery. You know, that's my big thing is self-awareness, self-discovery. Take all the tests, do all the things, get all the healing, have conversations with yourself, argue with yourself, figure out who you are, what you want, what you don't want, what you like, what you don't like, all the things, and stop being bullied by society.
Yes.
Boom. Mic drop. Let's do this. All right. So thank you, Kim, for being on here. This is really fun. I really enjoyed it.
I had a great time. Thank you.
So, all right. So thank you, listeners, for being on today. I hope you walked away with just a handful of nuggets that'll get you through today, get you through tomorrow, and, maybe become your well moment and have that conversation, do some self-searching and just sit with some of the things that you might have heard today. And if you have questions, hit me up. You can email Melissa at AfterTheWell.org or comment in the show notes wherever you listen to this. We check those. If you have any questions about anything that you heard today, feel free to contact me. Don't be a Karen about it if you didn't agree with something, but we can have a conversation if that's the case. Until next time, I appreciate you guys listening and would appreciate some likes, some love, some comments, and help me get through the algorithm of all the places that in games we have to play nowadays to be a relevant podcast, because I want my friends' voices to be heard because there's some good stuff being said. So with that, I bid you farewell. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of After the Well. We hope this conversation has left you inspired, encouraged, and spiritually refreshed. Remember, just like the woman at the well, your encounters with faith can lead to remarkable transformation. Be sure to subscribe for more uplifting stories, and may your journey be filled with hope, grace, and a deep sense of purpose. Until next time, stay refreshed and keep believing in the power of transformation.